day series of events from CNCF for the Navaratri festivities, and where we celebrate the goddess. And so we wanted to do this event with 9 women speakers every day, with a different topic. And so far we've had some great conversations. Today we are going to have a talk by Neha, and she's going to talk about cost optimization. Without any further ado, I will pass the torch to her and she can get started.
Yeah, yeah, thank you, Malu. Okay, so we should start with our session. Let me share my screen. My screen is visible, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so hello everyone. I am Neha and I work at InfraCloud as a product engineer. And today we are going to discuss about cost optimization in Kubernetes. I chose this topic because nowadays we see that there are a lot of companies which are coming up and are using Kubernetes, and a big amount of their whole expenditure goes into cloud. So it makes complete sense to understand how we can properly optimize our resources so that we could reduce the cost which we are spending over cloud and the infrastructure. Okay. So, in today's demo, we are going to cover a few points. We'll start with storage and network optimization, a brief about them, and then we'll deep dive into computation optimization, where we'll look further about how to analyze if something is really costly, different scenarios here, and how we can reduce the cost in that scenarios. I also have a few demos lined up here. Please stop me if you have any questions, and we'll take it from there. Okay. So the first one is storage optimization. And before actually talking about cost optimization, there is something which is more important than this. We could optimize our cost at two places. One is when we are initially creating or initializing the resources, and the another one is when we have already initialized it, but now we are realizing that no, we need to further optimize it, and there are few resources which are not properly utilized. So for the first one, with our experiences, we are going to initialize the resources. But for the second case, where we want to understand that if we are properly using our resources or not, we need to have monitoring in place. So for all the type of optimization we have to do, we first need to monitor our resources, see that if we are properly using it, and after that we could think of steps which could be taken further and to do further cost optimization. So, as I mentioned, for storage optimization, also we need to have monitoring in place over PV. So, we could have persistent volume monitoring, and we could check that how much resources or how much storage is actually getting used from the large amount, whatever has been configured. One example which I can give over here is suppose there are five microservices and five different users created them. They required some amount of memory, say again 5 GB. But thinking about the future that the storage required could increase in future, they created their PV with the memory of 10 GB. So now here itself we saw that since there are five services and only 25 GB was required, but now we have configured 50 GBs for the same thing. So we have uh, utilized, or we are actually using more storage than we should actually be using. So for this kind of scenarios, we could use dynamic provisioning, where we actually don't create the PVs, but we utilize storage classes. And there are different cloud providers, like there are AWS, EBS, there is Portworx, and all the other major cloud providers also, who provide storage classes. And using PVC or persistent volume claim itself, we can attach it with the storage class and dynamically provision it. Now, this storage classes itself provide the feature of resizing the storage classes. So, this feature says that whenever we have reached the limit, or we know that we have utilized 80% of our storage, the storage size, or the storage, so the storage size could automatically be increased, and we do not have to worry about future scenarios. So apart from all this, there is something called as cold storages. So suppose we have logs which are older than 3 or 4 months, and we know that we don't need it right now, and we could wait for some time if that retrieval is required. So for that kind of data, for archives or for older logs, we could move them to cold storages. Cold storages are storages which are 80 to 90% cheaper than our normal storages, but the trade-off which we pay over here is that the retrieval time could go up till hours. So for anything which is not required readily, we could move that to our cold storages and save a lot of cost over there. um, AWS S3 Glaciers and Google Cold Storage Cold Line are a few of those services. Uh, Now, from apart from this, uh, we can also optimize our cost on networking level. uh, First of all, it goes unsaid that we need to monitor our networking calls and see how many API calls are coming, how many API calls are going out, and so on. So when we do this monitoring, we'll realize that if there are a lot of, so suppose there are load balancer which is outside our cluster, and our services again and again going in and out, there are a lot of API calls happening inside and outside the cluster. uh, for that kind of scenario, we could have an internal load balancer, which would help us in reducing the number of calls which are going inside and outside the cluster. An internal load balancer could take care of all the calls which are for that server and could be handled internally. Similarly, there is cache DNS queries. If we see that there are a lot of DNS queries happening, and because of that, the hits are increasing, we could implement caching on the cluster itself, and we could cache the DNS calls which we are making. This would significantly reduce the number of calls made to the server, and would reduce the cost which happens because of this to and fro. These are few things which through which we can improve the cost. But I believe there is the third component, which is much more important or of more significance. Um, from here on, we'll deep dive into computation optimization itself. So, computation cost optimization can be done on two levels. So, we need to take care of our CPUs and memory. We need to see if we are properly utilizing these resources. It goes unsaid that for this also we need to have monitoring in place. We could either have Prometheus and then Grafana for looking into it, or there are other tools also like OpenCost, through which we can uh, monitor the cost of the whole cluster itself, and so on. So by either of these kind of tools, we need to monitor our application. And then we need to think of what all ways could be implemented for optimizing it, like there is horizontal pod autoscaler, there is serverless on Kubernetes, And then further we also have preemptible instances, which we are going to look in these further slides. Okay. um, yeah. So moving further into all the scenarios which we have, I wanted to discuss about what could be termed as costly. So if we see, there are two pie charts over here. One on the right hand side is the T2 small server. It's a small server. While on the left hand side, TG4 medium is a little bigger server than the T2 small server. But if we see in the right hand side, the second pie chart, we'll see that the 80% of the server is unutilized, it is sitting idle, while the TG4 medium server, which is a little larger server, it is 80% utilized and just 20% of it is idle. So for someone who is properly utilizing a bigger server, we cannot term it as costly for them because they have properly utilized the resources and they are paying for the services which they are actually using. And um, on the other hand, if we see, if our server looks something like this, where 80% of the server is unutilized, there is something wrong which we are doing and we need to rethink on this. And either we need to reduce the size of the resources, or we need to think about it and take further actions. uh, yeah. So if our server is looking something like this on the left, we are good to go, and we don't have to do anything further. But if our server is looking something like the right hand side one, where a lot of our resources are staying empty, we need to think about it and we need to implement features on this basically, or we need to implement something so that we could reduce the cost further. So here there are different scenarios and different actions which we could take in all these scenarios. The first one is where our CPU is staying idle. This is this first scenario where if you see in this chart, we can see that only 10 to 20%, and there was a little spike over here where it might have gone to 25%. Otherwise, my CPU utilization was less, till 25% basically, and till 10%. So if this kind of scenario exists, then after monitoring it, we need to resize the resources. Either we need to reduce. So if there is a deployment and there are replicas, so say if there are 5 replicas, we need to rethink about it and we need to reduce the replicas. So say downgrade it to 2 replicas, and free up the space which we don't need, free up the pods which are not required. Now, this is one thing where we could manually go and resize the resources. There is another feature called as horizontal pod autoscaler, where if there is a steady load, so for example, our server is utilizing the resources till a limit and there's a plateau sort of thing, but there are some spikes which come and go. So for that, some spikes coming and going, we can have horizontal pod autoscaler. What it is going to do is, we would provide the minimum and maximum number of pods, and we can also provide the resource on which we need to watch. So suppose we want the uh, auto scaling to take place on the on the memory we are utilizing, so we could provide the metrics over there, and then Kubernetes itself would take care of horizontal pod auto scaling, and it would increase and reduce the number of pod depending upon the request we are receiving, and this will be handled properly. So this works perfectly fine. But there are few other scenarios, like sudden burst, uh, which we can see in the second graph, or if we could see that this is working smooth, but there are again some spikes with this steady load. So for both this kind of scenarios, horizontal pod autoscaler does not works properly, and it might face some issues in scaling the pods at correct time, and there could be some reliability issues and so on. Also, if we see this second graph properly, then we'll see with what we have mentioned, we were discussing over here, that for whole day my server looks something like this, where 80% of the server is sitting idle. But for just 1 hour, or maybe for few minutes in a day, or maybe few hours in a day, my server actually spikes, and then the spike goes up till 80% utilization of the server. So if this kind of scenario is existing, we need to think of something where, uh, if there are sudden spikes also, or if there are no work happening on the server, this kind of scenario should be handled, and they should be handled in a way that we are able to optimize the cost. So whenever there are spikes, the server should work properly and should provide the result in a given time. But if there are no requests coming in, then our server should go down, or the number of pods should go down, and we should be saving cost at all such times basically. So for this kind of scenarios, serverless or function as a service works perfectly fine. Uh, uh, if there are any questions, please interrupt me in between, and we can take the questions.
Uh, so Neha, like probably we can answer all the questions at the end.
Yeah, okay,
So after the presentation, there
sure.
is yeah, you can
Yeah,
continue.
that
Thank
would
you.
also. Okay, so I was on serverless and function as a service in Kubernetes. First of all, what is function as a service? Uh, like we have applications running. What function as a service does is, whenever a request comes in, or whenever there is a trigger, the function call happens and the server would start. It would perform some action for me, and then it would go down. So similarly in Kubernetes, what happens is, for function as a service, whenever there's a trigger, the function would start, and for that there would be a pod which would come up. It would perform the action, and after the action has been performed, it would again get terminated, and the resource utilization would decrease in that case. So for yeah, so what feature it provides is that, we utilizing function as a service in Kubernetes help us in orchestrating and scaling. It is very easy to do this over here, and then we are able to properly utilize our resources and also optimize the cost. There are different tools which provide this as of now. There is Knative, which is serverless on Kubernetes. Uh, this is this is a broader landscape where it provides a lot of features other than just functional service. It is a complete package of serverless on Kubernetes. We also have another tool called as Fission. It is function as a service, so it's quite simpler, and it provides us the feature of uh, functions creations, and we could discuss this further in the next slide. So yeah, Fission basically works in a way that there are a few warm pods available with us, and whenever a new request comes in, so say there is a HTTP call which comes in, at that time my pod would get specialized with the function, or the application code. Basically it is going to take the request which came in, it will do the processing, and for that, if new pods are required, so suppose a lot of requests came in a single time span, then Fusion will take care of auto scaling. It would increase the number of pods. It would take care of all the requests and provide the response. Once the response is provided, after that it is going to wait for some time, and it is going to look if there are any new requests coming in. If there are no new requests coming in, then the pods would get despecialized, and then finally it would get terminated. So the benefits of using Fission in Kubernetes are that since it has the feature of warm pods, uh, the request or the cold start time of this is just 100 milliseconds. We are able to properly utilize the resources because we don't have a lot of uh, so suppose there is an application, and I know at times I would require three replicas or three pods of that deployment. I do not have to keep three pods running every time. I could just have a single uh, common language pod basically running. So suppose I know that my workload is going to be Golang workload, then just one or two pods of that could be running. And whenever the request comes in from any function which is in Golang, that Golang environment pod is going to get specialized, and it is going to do the task. Then it's since it supports triggers, there are different type of triggers like HTTP. There could be messaging queues, and then there are time triggers also. So it becomes easier for handling different scenarios. And then the scalability is seamless, which means that we don't see reliability issues when the request or there is a sudden burst kind of thing. I have a small demo of it which I would like to show. So I had one application which had two API calls. This is a small code in Golang, which does nothing but calculates the square root of all the numbers from 1 to 10,000. And similarly, this is another API call which calculates the square of these numbers from 0 to 10,000. And it's just post the results in the API response. So for these kind of request, I can create small fission functions. For each API call, there could be a fission function, and then as the request will come in, the HTTP there would be a HTTP route attached to these functions, and whenever the HTTP call would come in, it would get redirected to my function, and it would do the task and provide me the response. Okay. For this, this is my namespace where I'm going to do all the work today. I can see that there are no pods available right now. I would go ahead and create a fission uh, environment. Now, this fission, so what I did over here is I created an environment saying that it is going to be of Go type. So I provided the image of Go. This builder is for building the code. So if I already have a built-in code, I do not require this, but as of now we'll build the code. uh, we have provided the pool size. So this is how many number of readily available of warm pods we want. We could increase it or decrease it according to our requirements. So this created a fission environment. This is the pod which got created. It is the uh, pool manager. So we created it using the pool size. So it created one warm pod for me. This is the builder pod. So this is optional in some cases. Currently, we are using it. Now I'll create two fission functions. I'll explain this in brief. It's fission function create and whatever name I want to provide the environment. What is the entry point? So my entry point is handler because my function's name is handler. And then I provided the source files. I could also zip the file and directly provide it. They also have a feature of directly providing the images, and then it would directly run with that. I'll create these two functions. This created two functions for me with the code which I have provided, and it is currently using Pool Manager. Now what we can do over this is we could run the pods and we could see how the fission function is providing response to us and how the pod scaling is happening. Okay. So since I wanted some requests to run concurrently or parallelly, I have written a small script. So what it is going to do is it is going to execute this fission function, and depending upon if it's even or odd, simply it is going to call the fission function. So basically half of them would get called, half of the time square function would be getting called, and for half of the time square root function would get called. So when I run this, I simply printed down all the results so that it's easy to see that lot of calls are happening. Okay, so before that we'll try to watch on how the pods are moving over here. Yeah, so my script started running, it started printing results, and on this side I can see that the pods are getting created. Now if I just remove the watch, so we can see that 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 seven pods got created, and it is taking care of the parallel request I have made, and it completed all the requests and provided all the response. uh, what I wanted to show over here is that the scaling is very seamless over here, and if we would have as in I wanted to show you pods, otherwise we do not have to do anything on Kubernetes level. Everything is hidden and Fusion takes care of everything. Now if we see our graph on the Grafana, this is a dashboard which I have created from the memory utilization and the CPU utilization which we have done. Then we'll see that we were not using anything, and as soon as the request uh, came and the bus came, we could see that the memory and the CPU utilization went up. Now after waiting for a few minutes, okay, so we need to wait for a minute or so. So yeah, after waiting a few minutes, we would see that the pods would automatically get terminated, and this chart would again show a downwards move. So basically, what all in all this does is that it reduces the cost when we are not utilizing a resource, and we just have to pay for the amount when we are actually utilizing it. Yeah. So now we can see that all our pods automatically got terminated, and now we are just left with the two pods which were there initially. And if we'll again see over here, uh, in a minute or so, we'll start seeing that the pod count has reduced. Um, and again, depending upon how many number of requests are coming, the number of pods or the number of resources which get spawned depends. So if there was just one single call, just one pod would have handled it, and no more pods were required in that case. So see, we have started seeing this graph. It would decrease even further in a minute or so. So uh, this is one way of how we can actually um, actually optimize the cost if we know that our application is not utilizing the resources for the whole day. um, and this is going to improve our resources also. So this is one thing. Other than that, there is one more level up which we can go. We have something called as preemptible instances. So for suppose scalability, suppose our application is stateless, and we are not worried about if we lose an instance or a cloud instance immediately, then we should go for preemptible instances. For example, if we are running on a dev server, if it's a dev server and we are not concerned if the dev server goes in next 2 minutes, I could spawn another server and go further. For that kind of scenarios, we could go for preemptible instances. They provide a steep 90% discount in what actually we pay for the normal on demand instances. um, what we can do is we can club our cloud cluster with preemptible instances, and we can deploy Fission over it. Then we are going to run Fission over this preemptible instances. And this is going to provide me a significant reduction. The trade-off is that this since preemptible instances are the unused memory or the capacity which the cloud providers have, they can take it anytime whenever they require it. So for few cloud providers, the time provided before taking away the instances 2 minutes or so. uh, I have seen how application work in this cases, that they create few normal or on-demand instances and or nodes, and few of them they take from preemptible instances. This make this creates a balance of cost and reliability on the as in both the things are there in that case, and we are able to handle also our workload, and the cost also reduces in that case. So yeah, this is what I wanted to talk about today, and discuss about how different scenarios are there and how we can handle that and reduce our cost. Um, any questions if we have, I'll be happy to take them.
Hey Neha, thank you so much for the great talk. If anyone has questions, technical or otherwise, please feel free to use the chat, or also you can unmute yourself and ask questions. Yes, we will be sharing the recording as soon as we are done with all the events, Basil. I know there were a couple of questions from Ivan. Do you feel like those were addressed, Ivan, or do you have any other follow-ups?
I had to momentarily leave the room where I was listening to the call, so I apologize in advance for that.
No.
The specific question I would like to know is, Fission is new to me, and I would like to know if it's, as far as I could understand, it seems to be like a wrapper that adds more functionality to Kubernetes. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah, at a level it is. But it also yeah, we can call it a wrapper over it. A sophisticated wrapper. It provides a lot more features.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Neha. Sorry, thank you, Ivan and Neha. um, I think there's one more question. We've heard great use cases using the presentation. What is the one thing that Fusion does far better than any of its competitors?
So one thing is that since it is very much focused on function as a service, uh, and it's open source, it is easy to start working on it, and it does its task very well. As in the scalability and everything is good. If you want to make any changes over it, that is also good because the code is simpler. Basically, starting with it and getting tasks with it is quite easier than other competitors which we have.
Thanks, Neha. Any other questions? So, I was curious, Neha. We've had another talker from InfraCloud, and she shared on day one, Richa, and she shared a lot of great info on Victoria metrics, and she had a great deck as well. Is everyone at InfraCloud so smart and so well spoken?
uh, I'm not sure about, but I have good. I work with a lot of good people. That I can surely
Yes,
say.
I think you all seem to know your stuff, and I've at least learned a lot from both these conversations.
Yeah, thank you so much.
How did you get started at InfraCloud?
Um it I got started 2 years ago.
Mhm,
Uh, so a lot, as in I have learned a lot over here in this last 2 years. So the people around are good, uh, and there is always a scope of learning. The thing is that there is someone to push you to do something new, as in for uh, talking or for giving talks or for learning something new. It's a very open culture. You can ask any question to anyone.
mhm,
I have seen people questioning CTO directly if they don't find anything
mhm.
correct. So it's a very open culture. That is why people learn more, and yeah, it's good.
That's good to hear. These type of cultures I find always foster a lot of learning and good conversation. So I'm glad to hear that. I'll leave it open for any other questions about the talk or about Neha or anything like that.
They'll stop sharing if
Yeah. Okay, great. If there's oh, I think Ivan wants to have a link to your LinkedIn profile.
that I can do.
Oh,
I can
sure.
do.
Great, thank you. Then if there is nothing else, I think we can call it there. Thanks, Neha, for the lovely talk, and hope I'll see you all tomorrow as well.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for
Thank
listening.
you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening or day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Hope you'll join us tomorrow.